Hey, this is Kat, the lead boss with the Revenue Accelerator podcast with my guest today, Nate. Now, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because you do a lot of complicated things and get big results for your clients. So, Nate, what do you do and why should people care?
Well, to answer the second question first, everything I'm going to say is going to be amazingly interesting for all audiences, I'm sure. No, basically, what we do is human-centered design. So I run this company called Swarm, managing partner there, and basically, what we do is develop digital products. So that might take the form of an app, a feature, for an existing product like a website, or we can do full website. But really, where we help our clients is with strategizing around digital products. So, really kind of thinking through that human centered design process to actually create real experiences and not just about like getting to the quickest, easiest thing, but the thing that's really going to have lasting impact for brands, companies, or whoever we're working with.
So, like, why care about the experience? Because I know, like, you can get someone from Bulgaria to develop an app or something like that, Romania, somewhere in Eastern Europe. Um, they're really
Hmm.
good with tech there. So, like, you could just go on Fiverr, if you will,
Hmm.
right? Why is the experience something that you guys really hang your hat on? And what does that really mean in terms of the end user experience?
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's fair, and I think it's all about thinking about what scale you're at. So I know we talked a
Mm,
little bit about how we both do B2B work, and I work with solopreneurs. We're doing a lot of enterprise work now with Swarm, and I think that there's opportunities to think through it differently depending on what scale you're at. One of the things that happened recently is I was sitting in a marketing pitch meeting for one of my small business clients, and they had this diagram where they had content marketing strategy. And then underneath that, they had each of the channels like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then they had website. And what was really interesting thinking, I was sitting there and I was like, something doesn't sit right with me, like in this meeting. And I'm like, what is it? Why? And I was trying to investigate that a little bit. And I was like, what it is that like when you are using those other platforms, you're really just borrowing customers. I mean, don't get me wrong, like you should want to be on those platforms. They do a good job of thinking through user experience, but when you are on Facebook or Twitter, you're really limited to whatever they give you in terms of options. When you have a custom platform like a website or an app, you have a far greater opportunity to think through how your customer interacts with your service. And there's just far deeper ways that you can engage. And not everybody's going to need that. I think to your point, like, I'm never like, sometimes people come to me with a challenge like, why wouldn't I just go build it on Squarespace? And it's like, look, if you're at the scale where you just need to get a website up and you're a freelancer, da, 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 I'm not going to say, oh yeah, go spend, 20 grand on a custom developed thing. That it's like, that's insane. No, do what's right for the scale you're at. I think the problem with thinking of it as just another channel is that if you are at a scale of your business where you have budget, you know you're going to be able to go a lot deeper
mm,
and get more data, get better overall, like customer, what I want to say, like return customers. Like you're going to be able to, like, there's so many ways you can kind of
engagement
think
aspect. Yeah.
engagement. Yep. So thinking on that level, when you think through what that software experience possibilities are, I mean, that really opens up, you know maybe where people aren't thinking about when they think about how do I just go to Fiverr. You know what I mean? Does
Well,
that
I
make
mean, I
sense?
think it's really talking about the mindset of where you are in business, right? Not
Yeah.
just in terms of the economics, in terms of what money do you have, in terms of being able to invest in your business, if you will, but really looking at if you're a certain place in your business and you understand that the customer experience, the journey that they go through has a definitive and very direct impact in terms of your bottom line, then that's where you're actually going to start spending a little bit more of your money is I mean, at the end of the day, it's easier to resell than it is to sell someone
Yeah.
new, right?
Right.
So, what efforts are you doing? And I think that a lot of people who are newer in business are hyper focused on this. I need to sell, I need to sell, I need to sell. And it's so much easier. It's just, money begets money kind of thing of like, so if you have clients, clients beget clients kind of situation.
Mhm.
Um, so like what led you guys to kind of really focus on this experience aspect of things versus just kind of doing a churn and burn model of just getting stuff out there?
Well, so Swarm is man, how old? 2013 was when it was founded by some friends of mine, and I'm actually the newest partner at Swarm. So they've gone through quite the journey. But basically started out as like a mobile app development company, and mainly focused on mobile app development because 2013 there were just people looking for apps. Not that it doesn't happen, but it's a very different world we're in now, where people like it's like don't want an app, da, 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 it thinks differently. But I think the through the thread that I've noticed, and I've seen the company grow, and I came on in like 2019. A lot of the work that we've been doing has this throughput of being very human centered.
Mm,
It's really like this UX strategy work where it wasn't about they call this in the kind of agency world body shops, where it's like you're just going to go out and say, I want to get XYZ project done, and how much does it cost? Okay, I'm just going to go rent some bodies and like get it done. But agencies like Swarm have always been heavy on the strategy side. So somebody comes with an idea, like I want to bring a product to market, an app, a website, whatever, but I don't quite know what I need yet, and I want to work with you to kind of develop that idea out.
mm,
And all of the partners like I said, we all met through the startup world, and so we have a lot of experience with that kind of like early stage generating traction, like product market fit stuff. And that's the kind of thing where I mean I also train developers. I've taught coding and web development for several years, and that's just not something a general developer would do, is like think through like all the different aspects of a business and where's the
no, I mean, we're
ROI.
happy when they take showers. So like
Right,
actually
exactly.
forethought, but that's a big bonus.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's like people will just do what they're told kind of thing. And I think
Yeah.
that that's really the flip side. What I've seen both in Swarm and outside of Swarm is sometimes you come along projects where people did just kind of like go to Fiverr and say, I just want to get this done. And then the person just did exactly what they were told to do. And
Yes.
it's like, okay, but it didn't actually
That
fit
doesn't make
in.
sense.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
didn't make sense, or they didn't have the right metrics, or I mean, there's so many ways that that goes wrong, because then you're just kind of like, okay, well, cool, we spent less money, but now we have this thing that's totally useless, and it doesn't actually do anything
Right.
for our business. So,
Well,
um,
and isn't that where most people go wrong with their
yeah,
apps? I mean, at least that's what I've seen in terms
mhm,
of like, okay, great. I mean, we saw this huge, like, I have an app, I have an app, I have an app, I have an app, right? Like
yeah,
it was this thing. I for on my end, I've been seeing kind of more of this trend. I think in overall in everything when it comes to business is the quality over the quantity aspect. So like
mhm.
looking at where, so I guess the question really is where is the ROI when it comes to an app, right? So like we there is a point where you don't want to keep spending good money after bad, especially if you started off with a shitty foundation. So where's that place where people start seeing that return?
Well, it's going to be very different depending on the circumstance and the scale of the business. I mean, it's that easy answer of depends, I
Oh,
guess,
come
is
on.
what I want to say. I mean, I think that where people often go wrong with this is that they don't examine what the ROI is with an app. Like they race
Mm,
to the finish line with like, we need an app that does XYZ. And it's like, well, are those specific functions going to help? Because I mean, an app at the end of the day, it could take on different manifestations. It's a marketing tool. It's
right.
going to drive awareness or engagement, or it's a tool that you monetize directly. You know what I mean? And where that fits into the existing business model is unique to that business. So like, um, oftentimes when people are at the stage where they're like, I want to build an app, sometimes they're not even thinking about that part of it. And
Yeah.
then what I notice a lot that unfortunately is just very common is that they don't think past the launch. So it's kind of like, okay, cool. Well, we know we want to build an app and we're going to get all this engagement, but we don't think about the fact that like we're going to need to run updates, and like not version one is just the first version,
Right.
and that like you're going to
It's
have to
iterative,
improve on it.
people.
It is, yeah. And it's going to require support, and you're going to have to actually, I mean, you're building in kind of a software component to your business, so you have to
But
you have to do
software
that in
never
two different.
breaks ever.
Yeah, exactly, right. You just do it
Never.
once, and then there's never any updates from Apple or anything like
No
that,
patches.
or yeah, exactly.
There's no bugs.
No, no. But I mean, I think even just like that question of like, because I think people jump to like, what is the cost? That's what I noticed
Mm,
with apps is like, what is the cost? What is the cost? What is the cost? And it's like, okay, well, what do you? I think the flip side is better, which is like, what is the value? Like, what do you want to get
yes.
out of it? Like, is
Right.
is a better starting point, because then you can kind of work backwards to the cost from there. Because then you can kind of do an analysis of like, well, if we want to get a 10x return on this, we're going to need XYZ, at the beginning. And maybe that doesn't make sense for us right now, in which case we don't even need to, like, I mean, the amount of effort that would go into just finding the people and sourcing it and getting that budget together, so people jump to the finish line too quickly when it comes to technology.
Well, and that's what I love about what you guys do, is because you are so strategy focused in terms of really looking at not necessarily how's that credit card going to clear? Is that check going to, bounce or anything like that, but looking at where does this make sense for the person and where they are in business. And oftentimes one of two things happens. Either one, they've really missed the boat in terms of they should have done this years ago, but they hesitated, or you're way too early to the game, like go sit in the bleachers and, wait for the next one kind of situation. So when it comes to like integration and looking at the whole picture, the app is just a piece of kind of what you guys do and what some people come to you for. So what is that holistic look at the human design and looking at where the economies are going and what someone should really have in place when it comes to the digital thumbprint, if you would, of your business?
That's a really big question, and it's a good question.
I was really surprised that just came out. So.
Surprise yourself. It's so I kind of came about this from a practitioner standpoint, and then learn the theory, which is, I think, I think a lot of people in my position end up in that way, where I started I'm like a self-taught web developer. I mean, I just started like getting into web development, like, I think initially
typical nerd story.
Exactly you just kind of do it.
I got a computer and I nerded out.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, I just started to like learn on the job, people asking me to do stuff, and then I was just kind of figuring it out. And as the industry has evolved and changed, and there start to be these roles that develop, like UX, which didn't really exist like in that when I started. There wasn't really like a UX type person, and so and I think everybody kind of has a different angle that they kind of come at it from. But so I got introduced to design thinking. And when I got into design thinking, I don't know, have you ever encountered design thinking before?
Yeah, so I did work at a software startup, and it was a
Okay.
membership-based product that supported nonprofits. And so we did 5 million in VC funding and stuff like that. And so my familiarity with this exact world is much more in depth than I think most people would understand. So it's why I could say the comment of the shower thing, because I lived it.
You know it firsthand, the smells.
So all of the SOPs and the documentation and the bugs and the weekend testing and stuff like that. Yes, firsthand experience.
Well, just a mini story on that, because the people I met, the way I met the founders of Swarm, and was actually founded from a hackathon. So I don't know how familiar you are with that, but that's very similar.
I've led one of those. So.
You led a hack, so you know all about that, and that's definitely got its own world of smells.
That's its own kind of special.
Yeah, exactly.
It's but the like idea that times like a million.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, let's get a bunch of people into a room for 3 days, lock them in, and then they see what comes out after.
And just keep throwing Red Bull, open the door and just throw it in there and like watch them fight over it. It's pretty entertaining.
Yeah. Well, it's great. I mean, I got into that world. That was my introduction. I had been doing stuff on my own, but that's really where I started meeting designers and really getting into the startup world and all that stuff. And that's how I got the exposure. And then I learned about design thinking from a friend of mine who's like actually a former professor. And so he's very academic about it. And he was like, look, what you're doing is like this design thinking thing. And I was like, oh, weird. I guess I am doing that. And I read about it and I learned about it and did a lot of research and ended up teaching some classes around design thinking. And really, design thinking is about taking that hackathon practice that we use in product development world and applying it to organizational strategies and how teams come together. So I think it's really applicable to a lot of scenarios. I mean, not to go too deep into it, because I know you asked a really big question, but what I think is really interesting to me is that it's there's all these different frameworks, but they all start with the same step, which is sometimes called mindset, sometimes called empathy. And so all of these approaches, no matter how you slice it, there's the IDEO model, there's like the Illinois model, and like there's all these different ones, but they all start with that idea of like, look, whatever you're doing right now is like, you're in this kind of like line, this sort of like linear path. And that's limiting kind of the creative possibilities for the potential for the next step. So that first step in whatever design practice you do is always stepping out of whatever you're currently doing and
Mm.
asking a bigger picture and trying to think outside of your own head. Like, we are a team and we've been doing it this way. We have this website and it's does this, or we have a plan for an app and it's going to do this for us, for our business. Really thinking really big and high level and stepping out and kind of just observing and not being too judgmental. And I think that's really the key to any sort of solid design practice, no matter how you slice it, is like, you got to step out of your shoes. You got to not make too many assumptions. You got to be able to be open to like letting the thing, kind of come in where it needs to come in. So
Well, inspiration, right? And so
inspiration.
especially when you look at, engineers,
Yeah.
y'all are doing, who work in the binary zeros and ones kind of world, right? So this creativity aspect is not something that is bestowed as a gift on many people. It's why you can do, because you are that weird unicorn who can straddle both worlds. You can speak to upper management, and then you
Mhm.
can like translate it into directives for the engineers. Yeah.
Well,
I've seen, and so, but
yeah,
it's
go ahead.
not any different than being the CEO in your business in terms of take out the word app, take out the word codes, right? And all that stuff. It's still a marketing plan. It's still a revenue plan. It's still a lead gen plan. It's still whatever insert plan. It's the same process in a way
Mhm.
of how do you detach yourself from the end goal and really look at it from that 30,000 foot view to see what are the evolutionary steps to achieve not just what you want to next tomorrow or a month or a year from now, but what is that overall vision for how this, because it becomes its own human thing, right? It becomes a being that needs to be fed and taken care of. You didn't realize I was going to be able to go with you here, did you?
No, I'm glad I know you. I knew you had it in you. Yeah, no, I think just it works at all scale businesses now. I mean, you hear even like, sort of like old firms, like traditional firms, things like that. They want to be more agile. You know what I mean? And that's what
Yes.
they mean, is they want to be
That's
able
the
to
new
like,
word.
exactly. But I mean, what do they mean? They mean they want to be more creative. They want to kind of not be stuck in this one way, because
Flexibility. Yeah.
exactly. And that's how businesses kind of have to be. And it doesn't matter what scale you're at. It's always going to be that you kind of are adapting to the circumstances and that sort of thing. So yeah.
I mean, that's just so much of like business. And I think where there's a lot of frustration is I had a plan and this is what I was going to do. And your inability to, be nimble and to kind of move your feet, right? Like it is a little bit like a boxing match, if you will. Sometimes you get a duck, sometimes you can take a swing, but you still got to dance around the ring. Wow, this is really going somewhere. So
Are you a boxer? I didn't
no,
know this.
I will play sports. I hate watching them. So, I mean, I had this whole like imagery of Muhammad Ali in my head and stuff like that. So I was
Nice.
like, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee kind of thing. Wow, this is so special. So
Nice.
where do you think, because so there was this whole like, technology, I need to, have the automation, I need to have the app, I need to have the website. So people understand, at least now, much more so than 10, 15, 20 years ago, the value of having these technological assets. Where do you see all of these playing together and where is it all going?
Well, so I've had a lot of conversations because again, like I'm not sort of like professionally trained as a UX person. I've kind of
Probably
learned
in
it.
your best interest. So
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, I know people who have gone through training programs, very, very good training programs out there. But as I've immersed myself in this world and kind of owned that a little bit more, where it's like I never thought of myself as a UX person, but since I'm doing all this product work, I think that people. One thing that was said to me that was really, really clear is that companies have like product mindsets, and it's sort of like you kind of think in that way, and it
mm,
kind of has to come from the top down, where
mm,
it's like if the company is thinking about those things that you just said in terms of like being nimble, being more open-minded, being kind of like able to not be too set in a rigid way, that's going to permeate from the top down no matter how big the company is. And you look at something like Apple, where it's like this massive company, but within that company you have a lot of creativity in
mm,
different departments doing things. And so and that was kind of the thing that I think is interesting, is that I think people are becoming more aware of that, because the companies that aren't in that mindset, they notice that there's something about the other
Yeah.
companies. You know, they
Well,
they can
they
see
can't turn the ship as fast, right? And so they're
exactly.
seeing all the missed opportunities that people who are smaller and more nimble can get to because their infrastructure isn't set up for this.
Mhm.
Love
Yeah,
that
for sure.
hierarchy, right?
Yeah, it's even within a hierarchy, you can have somebody who is driving the discussion in a way that is open to change.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Without
Yeah.
necessarily like having to be so stuck in one way of doing it. And I think that the companies that really embrace that are going to be set up at any scale, whether you're like a two-person company or Fortune 500. The
Yeah.
companies that embrace that, like, you know, we are in this world of change. Like it is important that we embrace that change and like be willing to step out of our, path from time to time, are going to do better than the companies that don't, you know.
Oh, absolutely. So when it comes to, the digital transformation and all of that, what do you think are the kind of coming trends that people should be paying attention to that maybe were being dismissed before or that aren't really given their due right now?
I'm so bad at this one, to be honest.
Oh, sorry.
No, no. I'm glad you didn't clear all the questions with me.
I
I mean,
did.
I think that, I've had a lot of discussions around AI recently because it's like people who I know and trust, because I'm not in I don't know a whole lot about AI. I know a lot of techies who are into that.
I've
And
watched the movie. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I've seen the movie, but just the way people talk about machine learning and stuff, and blockchains and things like that, where it's like it gets sprinkled into conversation without people really understanding what or why, and it's like it's like sometimes the technology gets a little too far ahead in terms of the promise, where it is like a unicorn type thing, where you're kind of like, oh, this is the holy grail and it's going to solve everything, and it's like, well, it's not that. It's not that it's without promise. It's just that like it's like, you have to know when to use it and what the right balance is. Like
Mm,
when we're talking about like, human-centered design, there's a lot of data involved in terms of like, being able to look at what people are doing, or can you affect a change with it, with small tweaks and that sort of thing. But there's also like user interviews and things like that that are a little bit, more traditional, that aren't necessarily all this data driven, so I think that there's got to be a balance. I guess that's maybe the answers that I see, is that like you can't have too much of an over reliance on it. I mean, because these
yeah.
things, then you just get down this path where, like the VC world, you can just spend like millions of dollars on this shit that,
Oh my
and it doesn't
God.
do anything. Like
I've
it's like,
seen
and
it.
it has no like.
Do you know how fast you can burn through millions of dollars? Like it can happen
Yeah,
fast,
yeah,
especially when it comes to technology. And what I love about what you're sharing is this aspect of balance of it's not necessarily putting all your poker chips in on one thing just
yeah.
because that may be what the trend is or what's popular, if you will. But really looking at what is in your business's best interest and learning and looking at that ROI. Are there any things that people should take into consideration when they're looking at taking that next step in their business with the human design and applications and even their website, right? What are the considerations that they should take before making a decision with where to put their next investment?
I mean, I would say not enough people think about whatever that project is, what it's going to look like in a year. Even
Mm.
like, even that alone would be, because so many people start from the standpoint of how long will this take,
I
and
just
then
had an image of being like, this is horrible and so sexist for me. Like, if you want to know, like, look at the future with your wife, like, take a look at the mom kind of thing of
yeah,
like,
yeah.
but like looking at the future was so bad. I might have to edit that out. But looking at the, like, not just looking at the now in terms of, oh, wow, this is, this is what I want to do and getting hyper excited. Sorry, I totally interrupted you, but it just had to share it. I shouldn't
No, it's a good analogy, and now I won't be able to share this podcast with my future mother-in-law.
have.
No, I think that's right, because people want to race to the finish line. Like by the time we're talking, almost everybody is like, how long is this going to take? Can we get this done in 2 to 3 months? And it's like,
Oof.
even if we get it done in 2 to 3 months, which is, usually like you can get anything, like, I mean, it's not crazy to think about
But
that,
it's not
but
done.
it's not done. Yeah. And like after those 2 to 3 months, like what does the next 6 months look like? And what does the next 12 months look like? And like, it's insane to me how many people don't have like a product roadmap, or they don't have the team in place to
Yeah.
support stuff like that. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised at this point, but I'm continually surprised because people kind of just, like you said, they want to go on Fiverr and like, hey, I got 5 grand, like, can I get this done? It's like, sure, but also like, is it going to do anything, or like, is it I mean, is it just going to be up and done? And it's like, sure, you got dressed today, great, like, what
Right.
are you
Well, I
going to
mean,
do
it's
with your
a
day,
bit like a child, right?
Yeah.
Like you kind of go through this iteration and brainstorming and you give birth to this thing.
Hmm.
And but then it still needs to be nurtured and fed, and you might need to send it to private school, and then
Yeah.
maybe it does or doesn't want to go to college, and what if it wants a master's and God forbid a PhD, and then
Yeah.
will it actually even do anything other than be a professor if it does get a PhD, right? Like, but really thinking and supporting and the nimbleness of it, I think, is something that a lot of people don't look at when it comes to the application, because there is such a,
Hmm.
this is what it needs to do, but human behavior may demonstrate that that's no longer something that's valued by your market space, right? And
Hmm.
so, or something, another product came and just happened to blow you out of the water, how do you take that and redirect it to still achieve a result?
I think the concept of technical debt is really what we're getting at, but it's like people don't even. uh, It's surprising, but people don't know about that concept of like, yeah, you're creating debt. Like when you launch like that kid, like when you launch it out into the world, it's like, it's not like that's the end of it. That's really just the beginning.
Yeah.
And the longer you put it off, you're accruing a debt to maintain that thing. And then you have to decide, like, is this something that will live for the next 5 to 10 years, or is it not, moving away from the
There's
baby
never
analogy, but
loss, right? In terms of, I mean, it's just like investments in our businesses, right? Some of them
yeah.
have paid off in droves where you're just
Right.
like, oh, wow, that was such a good, whatever, insert thing that you invested in. And a
Mhm.
lot of them end up being things that you learned from, not that necessarily that you got your RI from, but you were able to build a better product or
Yeah.
have a better concept because it grew from something that wasn't necessarily fruitful.
Right.
But it still contributed to the end result. And so I think looking at it from that perspective, it's kind of maybe like going to Vegas, right? Of being like,
Mhm.
look, this is a little bit of fun money. You're not necessarily going to, win the house or whatever the term. See, I'm not good at this sometimes, but you're not going to break the house or whatever it is. Sometimes you will,
Mhm.
but really looking at what's the long-term goal, and do you have the sustainable components in place to continue to work your business when this is supposed to be like sprinkles on the cake and not the actual cake itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about mitigating risk, right? So it's like
Yeah.
everything is a gamble. And you're just giving yourself a better chance if you contextualize it. Like if you think about it, you set your goals, you kind of have a game plan going in, think about the life cycle of whatever it is you're building. You're gonna have far greater chance of success. It's always still a gamble, but if you're just going in blind and just saying, how do I get this done in a month for the cheapest amount of money? It's like, okay, well, that's a real tough bet, because it's like, now you just have to make it. It's like you're putting all your chips on on red, and you're like, all right, let's do it. I mean, without that sort of foreknowledge or forethought, I mean, you're really limiting your potentiality to make it successful and to work for you.
Oh, so good. And I really love I mean, that's just general good advice for your business, whether you're looking at a technological investment, really any investment, and looking at your strategy in your business. It's that forethought, looking at the 30,000-foot view and not just staying at the 3-foot one.
Mhm.
Nate, you've shared a lot of stuff, some things that went over our heads, and some things that landed for definitely sure right on point. How can people get in touch with you and learn a little bit more about what you do and how you could support them in their next positive investment in their business?
Well, thanks for having me, Kat. This was really fun, and I'm glad we came up with a ton of different analogies to describe what we do. um, if you want to
Wait
get in
to see how
touch,
you share this with your your
I just
partners.
want to animate it. I'm going to send it to an animator and like get all the different analogies out there. But yeah, I'm at Nate Cooper on Twitter. If you want to follow me personally, I wrote a comic book about how to build websites, and that's something that, like, me personally, has been like a kind of a thing that I share with people. But if you want to check out the work that we do with Swarm, our website is swarmnyc.com, and I'll put something up on swarmnyc.com/free by the time by the time this podcast is up.
Awesome. And all of that will be in the show notes for you guys to check out, and a little bit description of what will be going up, and any parting words, kind of things for people to keep in mind, who are listening right now.
I think it's always good to do your homework. I mean, don't make it, don't go overboard. I think people freak out a lot with technology. That's normal. It's fine. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be an expert, but but like I said, don't try to just like barrel down the road at 3,000 miles per hour. Like take a step back, like you said, and think about it before you jump in.
And get the people who know what you don't know, right? So we can't see the picture from the frame, but some people can see the whole picture for you. So Nate, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's fun.